Hi everyone, this is our channel, Meet the Real Story. Please like, share and subscribe.
We all enjoy watching horror movies. The fear, the torture, the suspense, the excitement. We have to watch them to the end to see if the evildoers get what they deserve. We love this kind of excitement from time to time. It interrupts our boring daily routine. We watch movies that excite and terrify, that stir our emotions, spark our imagination, present what if situations. We imagine what we would do if faced with the same situation in real life. I never really thought that I would actually have to go through something like that, though. My name is Sola. I'm 14 years old. I live with my mom and my brother. My father left us long ago, and we don't know where he went or anything else about him. Mom lost hope and gave up trying to find him. She decided to raise us alone. My brother Carl and I were best friends. He trusted me with all his secrets. We didn't have any relatives, and very few people came to visit us. One day, Mom received a phone call, and as she was talking, her face changed. Suddenly, she seemed afraid. She saw me coming and tried to force a smile on her face, but I noticed, and I heard her say, "Yes, it's the same address. When did you leave the hospital?" "Sure, sure, I'll wait for you." I wondered why Mom was so nervous, and I asked her, "Who were you talking to?" She told me that she was talking to her brother, and I thought, "Brother? You never told us you had a brother." Then she explained that her brother had left a long time ago and had just returned. She told me that he was coming to visit us tomorrow. I didn't know why Mom would have kept her brother a secret from us, but I was still excited to meet my uncle. Carl was at summer camp, which meant that he was going to miss meeting Uncle. Too bad. The next day, Mom cleaned the house and told me not to speak too much with Uncle because he didn't like talkative people. When Uncle arrived, Mom and I welcomed him. He was handsome, with long, soft blonde hair and an amazing smile. He told Mom that I was so beautiful, but Mom seemed worried rather than pleased upon hearing this. Uncle was so funny, and I loved him. He told me a lot of stories about Italy and other places. After a short time, he had to leave. I didn't want him to go, but he insisted. He said that he would see me again soon. Mom seemed horrified. I looked at her and asked her what was wrong, but she didn't answer. She just held her right arm. I thought it was very strange. Even stranger still, later that night, after I had gone to bed, I was startled when Mom woke me in the middle of the night to warn me never to accept any invitation from Uncle, even if it was just to go for a walk together. I thought that was very odd and asked her why, but she said that she would explain everything later. Next day, she went to visit my brother and take him some stuff that he needed. Before she left, she looked at me for a second, then she warned me not to go out alone. A while after she had left, the doorbell rang, and I opened it. Uncle was standing there. He asked where Mom was, and I told him she had gone out to do some errands. I asked him to come in, but he refused. As he was leaving, he hesitated and turned around and asked me if I would like to go to get some ice cream with him at a park. I recalled Mom's warning, but I thought to myself, he's my uncle. What's the worst that could happen? So I shrugged off Mom's warning and I went with him. I was glad I did because we had a great time, laughing and eating. He even told me some more stories. At some point during our talking, he looked up at the sky and said, "What beautiful birds." I looked up to see what he was looking at, when suddenly I felt something like a needle jab in my neck. Then all went out. I woke up to find myself in a deserted place against the wall with my hands tied over my head. Uncle was sitting on a chair with a strange collection of tools in front of him. His expression wasn't friendly at all, and he had a scary look on his face. I asked him where I was and what he was doing, but all he said was not to worry, that we were going to have some fun together. He then emphasized that the important thing for me to know was that screaming wasn't allowed. He asked me if I was ready for a simple test, but before I could reply, I felt a red-hot branding iron pressed against my leg. Contrary to his cautionary instructions, I screamed. In fact, I screamed a lot and very loudly. But instead of being angry, he just laughed and said that he loved to hear people scream. Then I lost consciousness from the pain. I woke up to a shocking splash of cold water. He told me that it was much too early to start fainting yet. Then he grabbed a cattle prod. He put it against my arm. I gasped and couldn't breathe due to the electric shock. I screamed some more, shouting between ragged breaths. "Are you crazy? What do you want from me?" He slapped me hard across the face and said, "This is my revenge, and you're the unfortunate recipient of it." Then he slowly but gently dragged the sharp tip of the knife across my face, with a gleeful look on his face, and said, "How would you like to have a nice, pretty scar?" Then he stabbed my arm with his knife, and I screamed again, and again he laughed. He was ecstatic and began jumping around like an excited monkey. I didn't know if it was day or night. All I knew was that every time I would pass out with pain, I would wake up to more torture, with a new tool for him to play with. How many days must I endure this madness, I thought. Despite my agony and suffering, I thought about Carl and Mom. Then, one day, he stood in front of me and began crying. He said that all of this was because of my mother. He told me that he had only been playing with Mom when he stabbed her in the arm, and that he had only meant to scare her a little, that she really shouldn't have summoned the police to have him arrested and committed to an asylum. He said he couldn't forgive her for that he can't trick or harm her again, so he decided to harm me instead. Then he smashed my knee with a hammer, and I lost consciousness again. When I woke up, he was gone. This was my chance to escape. But how? I tried pulling my hands out of the ropes. Though it chafed my skin painfully, I was able to free my hands. I was shocked to see how badly injured I was. I clumsily clambered up the ladder with my smashed kneecap, but found the door had a big lock on it. I retrieved his hammer and managed to smash open the lock. I found myself exiting an outside storm cellar that led up to a garden where an old car was parked. I hobbled out onto the nearby road and flagged the car. The driver stopped for me, and after seeing my desperate condition, he looked very concerned and asked me what had happened. I eased myself into his car and told him just to drive anywhere away from here. Then I would tell him everything. It was nighttime when he delivered me to my home. I knocked on the door, and Carl opened it. When he saw what a bleeding, tortured mess I was, he screamed and began wailing. He hugged me while I called for Mom. She woke up, came to me, saw my condition, and began crying profusely while hugging me tightly. I told them everything that had happened and apologized to Mom for not heeding her advice. I asked them how many days I'd been gone, and I was shocked to know that my horrific ordeal had lasted 90 days. We called the police, and I took them to the cellar I was held prisoner in, but Uncle was long gone. Now I know Mom's secret, why she was afraid when he called, why she held her arm in Uncle's presence, why she warned me not to go anywhere with him. If only she had told me why, things might have been different. I have lived in fear of everything since that day. Recently, I received a letter. It only made matters worse. It said, "This isn't over yet, until we meet again." Mom and I had the sick feeling that he was still watching us, waiting for an opportunity to take his revenge. So we moved to a city far away to start a new anonymous life, to try and put this horrible experience behind us forever, even if it did haunt our every waking hour.
There are all kinds of mistakes. Some are forgiven, some are forgotten. Some are borne by others, and some you pay for all the days of your life. These mistakes dog you relentless, even in your dreams. I've made mistakes in my lifetime, and I paid dearly for them. My name is Patricia. I am 19 years old, and I don't think I'm arrogant. I do think that I'm the most beautiful girl in my neighborhood. I live with my parents and twin brothers. Many boys in the neighborhood want to date me. My mom always encouraged me to think independently and to ignore other people's opinions. She told me to do whatever I wanted. Father was quite the opposite. He was always admonishing me to watch my behavior and behave myself, but I preferred my mother's advice, to be free and act on my own. My friends were like me. We were carefree and impulsive. We made bets about boys and love. We would flirt with boys and choose our victims and then cheat on them at the end to turn the tables on them. Playing frivolously with people's feelings was a bad thing, but I enjoyed it in a cruel sort of way. It thrilled and empowered me. But things changed when a guy named Jack saved my life one day. I was walking down the street alone while listening to music when a speeding car almost ran me down because I wasn't paying attention to where I was walking. Jack appeared from nowhere and pulled me out of harm's way and rescued me. He asked me if I was okay, and I said I was. He offered to drive me home, and I accepted. We didn't say a word during the drive. When we arrived home, I wrote my phone number on a piece of paper, along with a note telling him to call me in 2 hours. He did, and we talked until daylight. Jack was handsome, with brown eyes and well-tanned skin. He was a courageous man who protected me and helped me achieve all my dreams while we were together. If anyone annoyed me, I would go to him and he would embrace me in his arms to calm me. I felt safe whenever I was with him. We got engaged, had a small wedding with families and friends, and began enjoying our new life together. But my friends grew jealous of my newfound happiness, and they didn't like Jack. They thought that I deserved a better man. In the beginning, I tried to ignore their sniping at Jack, but I ended up being negatively biased towards Jack and began unintentionally sabotaging our relationship. I accused him of blocking me from achieving my dreams and of not caring about me. He promised me that after his graduation, he would find a job. I didn't believe him and asked to break off our engagement. He begged me not to and cried. But I had made my decision. I was torn between his love and my friend's jealousy and envy. I ended up losing him. Then I met Mark, a funny, blonde, rich guy with a nice car. Many girls wanted to marry him, but I pursued him and beat them all. I sensed that he didn't seem to care as deeply for me as Jack had, and that he didn't care about my safety as much either, but I dismissed my intuition. After all, he bought me anything I desired. So we decided to marry. Still, a little voice in my head kept whispering to me that I was making a big mistake by marrying Mark. After our marriage, we lived in a big villa with a swimming pool and lots of servants. But Mark changed after a while. He became irrational and paranoid. He began controlling everything in my life, even my lifestyle and my behavior. He raged a lot. Finally, I told him that I was fed up with his behavior, and that I didn't like being controlled by him like a dog on a leash. He sneered that he owned me because he gave me all his money to spend. I stopped making love to him, so he began raping me when the mood struck him. This made me miss Jack and his deep love for me. I cried a lot during our now miserable relationship. I was so distraught that I went to see a doctor with one of my friends. After checking me over, the doctor told me that I was pregnant. I was torn between joy and sadness. When I told Mark about my pregnancy and situation, he told me that we were still young and that I should abort the baby. And he threatened me, said if I didn't get an abortion, then he would do it himself. I furtively collected all my things one night and ran away to another state. I didn't know how to start over. I stayed in a motel for a while and worked in a restaurant as a waitress. I agonized a lot during my pregnancy about whether to have the baby or not. I had a kind colleague named Veronica, and I told her my story. She sympathized with me and asked me to come live with her. One day, I had a strong stomach pain in my 7th month of pregnancy, and she took me to the hospital. I was surprised to find that the birthing assistant was none other than Jack himself. We looked at each other silently for a moment. Then he asked me about my life, and I cried and asked him to help me. I saw the love in his eyes, and he told me that he would do his best to help me and the baby. Before the surgery, I held his arm and asked him to forgive me. He shushed me to be silent and confessed that he still loved me. I cried like a baby. He hugged me and made me feel warm and safe. His loving smile was the last thing I remembered before going under the anesthesia. I woke up in a room full of flowers with my Veronica smiling beside me. Jack knocked on the door and entered with a nurse in tow behind him. She was holding my baby, and they congratulated me for having a beautiful little girl. After that, he visited me every day at the hospital. I told him everything about my miserable life. He offered to let me live with him and promised to take care of me and the baby.